Breaking It Down with Frank MacKay. This is 103.9 LI News Radio.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to Breaking It Down. This is Frank MacKay, but more importantly, you are in the midst of hearing just a wonderful story and series of stories coming from the author of The Children's War, 1939 to 1949, Peter Gawenda, and he has just an amazing story that needs to go on. It needs to last the centuries, and hopefully we're doing our small part here in preserving that story. Professor Gawenda, before the break, you spoke about how the young boys and I don't know, was it young boys and young girls, but they would go around and they had a flag, a red flag, and every time they saw a bomb, that they were to put the flag there. Were the girls included in that, or was that just the boys?
No, we were only the boys. We decided to keep our sisters, and my sister was too small anyway. But my cousins, we decided, no, the girls needed to stay home and help their mothers. And so it was only we boys. And we tried to keep them out of harm's way. And by the way, 49, I might want to just explain
sure,
that
please.
Was, for us children, the end of the war was when my dad came home from Russian prison, which was in 49. But coming back, we also collected lots of empty shells from ammunition because we had to collect that. The Germans had to collect it. It was needed. The metal was needed to
recycle, right? For other
correct to recycle. But at one time, I never forget, we had two sacks. One was actually one pillow cover in one potato sack, and the potato sack we would always fill with if we found ammunition that was already spent. But then in the pillow, we would find any type of ammunition that had not been fired
now,
yet.
Did you? I know we talked off mic, and I understand just from a little bit of research here and off mic conversations that while. And again, if I'm jumping ahead, then just stop me in my tracks. But you were looking for shells with your brother and your older brother Manfred, right? And you stumbled across live ammunition, serious ammunition.
Yeah, we stumbled across a whole cache of Russian ammunition, which was it looked like it was not just spread out. It seemed to be like concentrated on one of the areas. And we, as much as we could carry, we grabbed it and took it back to my grandfather, who immediately notified his unit. And we were visited not even an hour later by the Gestapo, by the secret police, because they wanted us to go with them and show them where that location was. But my grandfather said, no, I do not want to let the children go. They explained where it is, and so you need to find that location by yourself. He feared that we might be observed, we children might be observed by people who the ammo was intended for. And so immediately the fear of partisans that were close to our area came up.
Wow. What foresight.
And,
just amazing foresight. And he had that much clout or the ability to convince the Gestapo not to force you to go with them, which is amazing.
Yeah, he was, for us children, it was always like he had a tremendous command voice. And then he would speak slowly and very convincing. And, well, that's final. We do such and such. That's final. And he would not accept anything else. And my grandmother several times was afraid that they would pick him up. But he was very popular, and so they probably didn't dare to pick him up.
Wow.
And,
just an amazing situation to go through. At what point, at this point, what was the age of you and your brother?
We were both, my brother was already 7, a little bit over 7. I was a little bit over 6.
Wow. Just the responsibility and the magnitude of what you had to deal with. And it really wasn't, it wasn't hitting you at that point of how serious this was. This was adventurous. This was an adventure for you in some sense, was it not?
Adventurous, and we recognized the responsibility that we had. We felt extremely responsible, not only for our lives, but for the lives of others. And so that was something that he really pushed, and that's what I still have today. I do not feel only responsible for myself, but for my family, for my students. And so that was, in my opinion, one of his great achievements. And my brothers, until Jürgen, for example, died, was the same way. He was with the fire brigades. He was in charge, saving lives. And my older brother, very similar, also with the fire brigade. Even today, he's a member of the fire brigade. And although he's already 80. And so that was their achievement. And it's very, very strange. My step-grandmother, the mother of my mother, she was the second wife of my grandfather, of Opa Müller. She always said, if you are a teacher, if you become a teacher, you will live eternally. Because whatever good you do, whatever great you teach, will live and will be handed on. If you're a bad guy, then that will continue also, and you will have always bad people. And so I kept that in mind, although I didn't say at that time I wanted to become a teacher. But she probably kind of put the seed into my mind, hey, become a teacher. And so all of us, my Jürgen, the one who died, he was in charge of teaching the fire brigades and teaching the chimney sweeps in his district. And my oldest brother, even today, still teaches in the military and teaches, although he's 80, and teaches in civilian life whenever somebody needs something special. Now,
just another reminder to those just joining us late. Please, we encourage everyone to binge listen to the rest of the series. They can find it in many of the same spots on the internet, internationally, anywhere. If you Google this, and for those listening on their radio, I want to remind you, if you joined us late, Peter Gawenda is our very special guest on this series. The Children's War, 1939 to 1949, and if you tuned in late, 1949 is when Peter's father came back to Germany and came back to a family still together, thanks to the efforts of his grandfather and his family in general, his mom, and even the him as a young child and his brother, and he also talks about his two families, the pre-war family and the post-war family, and just an amazing story. You mentioned Stalingrad. I can't imagine anybody surviving Stalingrad. Your father, did you have many conversations with him, or any conversations with him about Stalingrad?
Very few, late in life. And what actually happened, he had gotten injured and succeeded to escape before the ring was closed. And so before the encirclement by the Russians was closed. And so he made it out and was picked up, I'm not quite sure where, still in Russia someplace, and brought back to Holland into a hospital where he stayed for maybe 6 months. But from there, immediately they shipped him back to Russia, because he was actually a specialist on the 8.8, one of the cannons, air defense cannons, and he was a sharpshooter. And so he would come back to Germany, pick up units, train them as sharpshooters, and then drop them off in different locations in Russia. And so that's at the end, at the end of 44, that's when he got captured by the Russians. But although he never really said it, a friend of his one time said it, he put on the jacket of a dead fellow soldier, and only kept his papers. But when he was captured by the Russians, he was captured under a different identity. And he knew that he was under, that if they would have captured him and recognized immediately who he was, he might not have survived.
Because he was a higher rank than the person he took the.
Initially, he fluctuated back and forth. Whenever they needed somebody as a battalion commander, okay, so they made him a lieutenant colonel. But then I think his highest rank at the very end, when he got captured, was master sergeant, something like master sergeant. But
now, when he got captured, would he have gotten better treatment as a superior officer, higher officer?
No, he would have gotten better treatment as a soldier.
As a soldier,
yeah.
Okay, as a foot soldier.
Yeah.
Wow, just an amazing story. The plane, you got hit as a young child, by a low-flying plane.
Correct.
And your eye actually came out of a socket. Tell us the story.
Okay,
it's gruesome.
What happened was my older brother and I, Manfred and I, were running back from kindergarten during an air raid. Although we were not supposed to, we tried to get into some houses, but they all were locked. And so first, the plane, when we were running downhill, they came from up the hill down over us, firing. But then in front of us went up, and there were apartment homes, went over those homes, probably made a U-turn, came back and started firing again. And when he came back towards us, almost on the street level, I got hit over my right eye. And I'm not too sure whether it was a shrapnel or whether it was a bullet, but the wound was at least 6 to 7 inches wide. And the whole eye just dropped down. It came out. And my brother realized it, pushed it, held it, pushed it up, and then he pulled me over his shoulder because I had passed out, and dragged me home, maybe 300 to 400 meters to my parents' home. And from there, my grandfather must have seen something or must have seen us. He came over. He and my mother, they took me and to the hospital, and naturally, I don't remember that, but I was told later. They recognized I'd lost a lot of blood, and naturally, somehow the gap needed to be sewed, and my grandfather supposedly took off, and there was no doctor in the hospital because they had all been drafted, and he came with a doctor, and although my mother never confirmed it, it must have been one of his Jewish relatives that sewed up my wound, and they found people that had my blood type, and so they made a blood transfer, and but then my grandfather supposedly took that doctor back into hiding, but then succeeded to get him to Switzerland. And so that's why I assume that it was a Jewish doctor. And
wow.
In the hospital,
wow.
Yeah, I stayed in the hospital for a while, and actually I was blind. And so when my grandfather came to visit, he would pick me out of the bed, or take me out of the bed, hold my hand, and then we would walk to where the soldiers were, the injured soldiers, and then we would walk, and he would talk to the soldiers, ask them who they were, how they were. And when the soldiers saw this kid, this child, with the bandage around his head and eyes closed, eyes covered, they very often, and that's what my mother was saying, they always felt like, well, heck, look at that kid who is injured, and here we are complaining. And so it was almost like my grandfather was how would you call it? Almost like a nurse telling him, hey, yes, I understand you're injured. And he asked them for their parents' addresses or for their wives' addresses or fiancés.
Almost like a social worker. Correct. Almost. A nurse. Yeah.
And he would write letters to them to tell them how their children, how their relatives were, and that he had visited them. And so it took about 6 months before I then finally, and I remember I was always wondering, why in the world would they take off my bandages when it was dark and at night? And come to find out that I was blind. And so that's why I thought everything was dark. And my grandfather then finally started saying, okay, now you should starting to see maybe something light, maybe you could see silhouettes. And sure enough, it took another month, and I finally was almost back to seeing, but I saw everything in kind of a bluish color, which meant I had lost my color vision. But it took another several years before I had it back, almost. And even today, I don't have full capacity of seeing color. But
just amazing. Yeah. It's amazing that you got your sight back at all. I mean,
and something else happened at that time. And after that injury, my parents, especially my grandfather, recognized that I was really badly stuttering. And so when I had my sight back, we went down to a little creek right behind my dad's house. And he said, okay, now let's look for real nice round pebbles. Okay, so he had found one and showed it to me. That's what we need. And so I found several, but he took then only 2 of those pebbles. And he said, okay, open your mouth. And he washed them naturally before, and then he put them under my tongue. And then he practiced speaking with me. He would tell me something, I would have to repeat it. And the very strange thing is I lost my stuttering maybe within 4 or 5 months, and I would speak correctly.
Are you aware of anyone who's used this technique since? Have you passed it along?
I have passed it along, and I have used it. And I have one grandson who is not really stuttering, but I tell him, take 2 marbles, put them under your mouth. Or I tell him to do the same thing that my grandfather did. And sure enough, whenever he does it, he doesn't stutter. And so
your grandfather, to me, is like a Superman. I mean, he could do anything. He just can do anything. His bedside manner is amazing. And not only with those soldiers, but to explain to you, now, look, you're going to get your vision back in a little bit. Just, it sounds, he sounds like such an unbelievable leader that he, every situation that came in front of you, he just seemed to have an answer for. Again, Peter Gawenda is our very special guest, and you are listening to Frank MacKay, but more importantly, Professor Peter Gawenda is the author of The Children's War, 1939 to 1949. 49 is when his father rejoined his family, and Professor, continue. It's just riveting, just absolutely riveting.
Okay, and I have to admit, all this what happened to me would happen to Manfred, to the older one. I wanted to put on paper because my children asked me, and then my brothers and sisters asked me, especially the 2 younger brothers that were born after the war, because they had not met their grandfathers. They hadn't met their grandmothers, and they really hadn't been in Oberglogau or Gleiwitz, and so they wanted me to put it on paper. And so Manfred helped me once in a while, but to correct something or to add something, just to make sure that we would give that knowledge that we had, the experiences, and they are personal experiences, and some might be a little bit different from how the grown-ups would see it, and to have it for my family, and especially also for my mother's and my dad's family members, so that they would be able to read, okay, that's what happened in those years during the war.
Just an amazing, riveting story. Your grandfather, Opa Miller, is to me a central character in this, not just the book, but the story. And there's a story, and we're running close to another break here. But Peter, if you could, there's a story about a plane crashing. An enemy plane to the Germans, plane crashing, and the plane was put on display, but also the pilot was put on display, and it was your grandfather who ultimately put an end to that display, morbid display.
And what actually happened was there was an attack on the town, and obviously the sugar factory, and one of those planes must have gotten hit, and in order to make it over the town and not crash into town, the pilot dropped the bombs, and supposedly a school was hit. Whether children were in it or not, I don't know. But he made it over the town and crashed on the other side of the town. And they put that airplane, it was almost intact because he must have done a very good forced landing. And the strange thing is, from the crew, they all disappeared. They must have jumped out or maybe before on parachutes, but they weren't discovered. But the pilot who was in the plane, he got killed. And so they put this airplane on one of those, I think you call them over here a lowboy, meaning one of those.
Yeah.
And they had the wings still on it, or they put the wings beside it, and they had the pilot who was killed, by the way, and put him on display. When my grandfather saw it, that's when the only time that I really saw him extremely angry. And he got people from his unit, and I think they succeeded to take the pilot, and they buried him where other prisoners, where other dead, like Italians, Americans, and British had already been buried, and they buried him. And at that time, though, my mother thought, okay, now that's it, they're going to get him. They didn't.
It's compassion. He had compassion even for a pilot that was attacking your hometown. And just an amazing man. Opa Miller. And again, those joining us late, we urge everyone to binge listen to the series, the whole series on Peter Gawenda. I'm thrilled to be his co-pilot on this mission to get the message out. And I shouldn't be so light about it, because you have seen war up close, very, very close. The Children's War, 1939 to 1949, documents that, and the series of radio interviews will document the stories and more that are in that wonderful book. Peter Gawenda wrote that book, and just it's an amazing read. Everyone should get it, and everyone should continue to listen to our conversations here. Peter Gawenda is just an amazing author, somebody that is not only a witness to history but a participant in history. Peter, I want to thank you very much for sharing this with us, and we will see you again next week.
You're very welcome. And next week, that's what we will talk about, our flight out of Upper Silesia into Austria and then into Germany.
It's like you just can't take your mind off of it. It's just amazing, riveting story. Peter, thank you for sharing, and we will see you next week.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for letting me talk.
Peter Gawenda, everyone, is our very special guest. We urge everyone to binge listen or listen to him one by one, but please listen to every part of this series. You can't miss it. The Children's War is the name of the book, 1939 to 1949. Peter Gawenda is the wonderful author of this unbelievable testament to World War II and what families had to endure. Opa Miller, his grandfather, is just a heroic figure, as is everyone in his family. We will see you next week on Breaking Down. This is Frank MacKay.